We don't rock labels. We were born supreme.
Hey, we got a special guest here. You know, in the words of the great Nas, "Till the war is won." We got somebody who's been on the front lines as a public defender. She's very humble. So I'm not gonna talk about her educational background, but you know, she's been in this league that rhymes with Bivy, and it just has a lot of great insight. And we're going to discuss today with Aisha Dennis about, the importance of some things going on politically that maybe sometimes we don't understand as the culture from the outside looking in. She's in the infantry, serving in court, knowing how we're viewed, knowing the importance of these Supreme Court justices that are nominated. So it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much for
welcome.
Thank you.
This is normally Gentleman's History Hour, and it's still Gentleman's History Hour, but we got a lady here.
Yeah.
So,
two gentlemen and a lady.
Two gentlemen and a lady edition. I like that.
Yeah, we we initially wanted to talk about what's going on in the Supreme Court, but before we get to what's going on now, we always like to try to backtrack and take the context of what happened in history and use that as a confirmation for what's happening now.
Okay.
So initially, we were thinking about the three that we would consider three important Supreme Court cases that affected black people. One was the Dred Scott case. One was Plessy versus Ferguson. And then the last one was Brown versus the Board of Education. So those were the three main cases that we feel like, okay, that had a huge effect on us. Going from the 1800s all the way into the 1950s. And then we're bringing it into 2020 and how the Supreme Court and how that's affecting us now. Because our representation on the Supreme Court is, we grew up knowing Thurgood.
Yeah, I think it's been 1,200, something like 1,200 white justices and one black or two, something like that.
Not 1,200, and I see y'all not counting Clarence Thomas, and I'm not mad at it.
No, but just in general though, looking
at. But
the
first was Thurgood, so we always knew Thurgood. With Clarence,
Yeah. But now, how would you see the impact today of some of the things that have come in the Supreme Court, and what are we at risk? Because to be honest, as a everyday voter, I don't pay attention to sometimes the Supreme Court nominee and all that, but you have really enlightened me to the fact of this has a real impact on our life. So for the general followers who don't necessarily view, review each and every justice, how does this impact us?
Well, first, I would say there's the trial court, the appellate court, and then the Supreme Court. And the trial court and the appellate courts are really where most of the federal cases are being decided. Okay. So when we talk about elections, we want to think about the fact that, there's this huge Supreme Court ballot that's in the news, but there's also all of these other appointments that have to be made by a president, and those are going to impact how much time your cousin or your brother or your sister is going to get when they face this judge in a criminal case.
Free tea,
or, what's going to happen in the lower court level with affirmative action or with abortion or with kind of these hot topics that may or may not need to go up to the Supreme Court based on what happens in the lower courts. But as far as the Supreme Court, you guys you were bringing up three huge cases that had a huge impact on just black justice, justice for black folks in America. So that certainly is going to continue. I think right now we already had a decently conservative court, and it looks like with the appointment of Amy Barrett, it's going to probably get more conservative. And so you might have a case that, I don't think anybody's going to overrule Brown, but you might have some cases that kind of really take us back. So if you look at 2013, where the Supreme Court pretty much gutted the Voting Rights Act, and now you see all of these states coming up with these restrictions to voting. Even Governor Abbott here in Texas came up with the restriction of if you're going to drop your ballot off, there's only one location for Harris County, which is one of the largest counties in the entire country.
Wow.
Right.
And that's the largest county in the nation.
Harris County is the third largest county in the nation. That's a direct result of the
Shelby County case out of the Supreme Court in 2013.
Wow, okay.
Okay.
Did not know that.
So a lot of people, had that not happened, he wouldn't have been able to so quickly change the law. Because Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act required them to get clearance before they could make those types of changes.
Wow.
So,
Wow, okay.
Pretty much a Supreme Court case is having a huge impact on our election and who will be president.
I had no clue about that. And when you go back to, you said that there's trial court, appellate court, and then is the president also selecting? He's pretty much appointing the judges on the appellate courts as well too. And
that's correct. And I one of the debates, someone was saying that Trump has only appointed, I think, one black judge, if any, maybe none.
Okay.
So he's appointed tons of judges. I mean, he is really changing the face of the federal judiciary, and he's appointed little to no black judges.
Wow.
Come on, Don. How you said? I thought you did the most things for black folks.
Since Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Let me ask you. My bad. I ain't trying to hog up all the questions, but I had a couple.
And for the record, I'm not like a super authority on anything. I want to
y'all
too. But
I want to take it back to the Abraham Lincoln once we,
I just have the only other question I had is, so like the difference between like the 19 black judges that were elected,
in Harris County.
In Harris County, so those are that's a different court. That's state court.
Exactly.
Okay, so which is handling something different from like the federal.
It's just different jurisdictions. So when I was a public defender, I would tell my clients, like, the state court might be like your mother, the federal court might be like your father, and you might mess up and you go to mama, and mama has one punishment for you, and daddy might have another one.
Okay.
And when it comes to kind of the civil side, state courts actually have a lot of power when it comes to kind of state matters, whereas the federal court is supposed to be more limited in their what's called jurisdiction.
Okay. Oh, understood. Shout out to Judge Tony for Judge. I did that digital campaign, one of the 19 affected. That was me behind the wheel.
Shout out.
Let me pass this
but
mic.
Again, elections matter.
It does. And I was thinking about, with the current president saying that he's done more for black people since Abraham Lincoln. And we go back to Abraham Lincoln. We had an episode, we talked about the compromise of 1877 and how that basically ended Reconstruction and started Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. And to travel even further back in time, and we started thinking about what happened with the Dred Scott case, starting in 1846 and really coming to prominence in 1847, lasting all the way about 10 years of going from 1847 all the way to 1857. And with that case, had a lot to do with citizenship and how we were viewed by the Supreme Court as property at that time, as opposed to black people. Mm-hmm. Meaning Dred Scott was enslaved. His master took him to free territory, because you had the Missouri Compromise around that time. So you had enslaved states, and then you had free states. So my master takes me because he has a job, and he goes to a free state, and then I go there, and then I marry a woman, and then we have kids in a free territory. Mm-hmm. Then, as I get sold, or at that time we're still kind of looked at as property. Then I get sold. Now I go back to an enslaved state, and they're saying, and I'm going and saying, hey, I should be free. My kids should be free. My wife should be free. They say, nah, you're not free. Even though you crossed free lines, now that you're back in enslaved territory, now you're considered a slave again. And what's crazy is at that time, that set a precedence over the Missouri Compromise. But they're like, okay, we created the Missouri Compromise, and then we went against our own compromise that was created. So that case with Dred Scott, with having a wife and then having kids in free territory, you would think, okay, those kids should be considered free. But then when he went across those territory lines, and in the Supreme Court, and we talk about it was a buildup, because it's over 10 years. And then once it gets to the Supreme Court, from my understanding, that was considered one of the worst Supreme Court decisions. It was ruled 7-2, meaning 7 that, hey, looking at the Constitution, when they were writing the Constitution, they didn't have us in mind.
Yeah.
We were just considered property, not as human beings, black human beings. So that's property. So that's your property. You brought your property to free territory. Then you brought your property back to enslaved territory.
I feel that.
So they're not going to be considered free at that time.
I got a feeling the story about how I feel like that relates even now to today, but I want to hear your thoughts on that.
So I think context just matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can't look at the Dred Scott decision without thinking about, what was going on at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, you had a lot of division between the North and South. You had a
Yeah,
lot
definitely.
of northern states abolishing slavery, and
Mm-hmm.
you had southern states trying to hold on to it. And so you had Congress come up with this Missouri Compromise that basically said, as they're bringing in new states, if you're Missouri or above, you'll be free,
Yeah.
and if you're under it, you can be a slave state.
Yeah.
And that's the legislative branch. And then now you have the judicial branch looking at all the strife that's going on.
Yeah.
And if I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, which maybe they don't
Yeah.
deserve, but if I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, they're trying to save the nation. They're trying to keep the nation unified.
Mm-hmm.
And they know if we have a ruling that says, hey, slaves, all you got to do is make it up to the North and
Yeah.
you're free, then
Yeah.
the slave South is going to rebel.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the context for why the court went the way they went is because they wanted to kind of appease the South.
Mm-hmm.
And I think why the decision was seen as a bad decision is because it was an example of judicial activism. I think to current day events, people think about judicial activism as being something that's progressive or liberal. But there's certainly conservative judicial activism, and that was
Yeah.
very much a conservative judicial activism. And I think, at the same time, I say that because they went against the legislative branch, and they also overruled and held unconstitutional a law that was only the second time in the history of the United States
Yeah.
that had happened. And that was a huge law.
Because the
to hold.
constitutional law was the Missouri Compromise, right? I want
Well,
to say at that time.
that's what they said was unconstitutional,
Yeah, they claimed it unconstitutional.
which was
yeah.
that was a really big step that they actually didn't have to make,
Yeah.
but they chose to make that step.
And he fought for 10 years. You got to think about it. He fought for 10 years. And in the families that he was being bought and sold by played different roles in his situation as well.
Yeah.
Because, okay, you get bought by this family, and then she marries an abolitionist.
Mm-hmm.
So now the abolitionist is like, you own slaves? But he's still fighting, and one of the families, supposedly, if you're doing the research, was paying his lawyer fees.
Let me ask you this: do you think judges are? Because I know even today when the Supreme Court justices are recommended, it's kind of like their background and this. Do you think judges are capable of not putting some of their personal bias in judgment and truly looking at things objectively? I'm not gonna say are they capable, but I think, do you think in general there are many judges that just look at stuff, straight from just the law, and whether it's this or that, or do you think judges inherently are going to bring their natural bias?
It was in the Dred Scott case. It was some bias with the president at that time, and
With
his
the-
relationship with the Supreme Court.
No, that's real. And just
I mean, I think like anything, we all bring our own biases to any decisions we're making. I think as a lawyer, one of the reasons I wanted to be a lawyer is because I do think we do constrain ourselves in the law. So I'm anti-death penalty, right? I don't believe in a death penalty. I don't think we deserve to kill people. But if I'm a judge, if that's the law, then I'm enforcing it. And I might not, as a person who is anti the death penalty, I might not enforce it in the same way someone else does. But at the end of the day, it's the law. So some people are going to be sentenced to death. It just is what it is.
how powerful is a judge? Okay, is a judge capable of just saying, I know the law says this, but I'm going to do that? How does the case of Brock, whatever his last name is, the swimmer in Stanford who was guilty of rape, but was given, a very light sentence. I don't even know if he did jail time, but if he did do jail time, it might have been something like less than a year. It might have been 2 or 3 months. And then he was on probation, and the judge said they did that because he was a good kid and had a promising future. How powerful is a judge when it comes to rulings? And
I think it depends on the issue. I think when it comes to criminal cases, especially you're talking about trial court, and you're talking about sentencing, I think they have a lot of discretion. So they can kind of do what they want within bounds, right?
Okay.
But I think when you're talking about bigger issues, like can, Missouri have free slaves that migrated up, or
Yeah.
Illinois, I think, or whatever state it was.
Yeah, he went to Illinois.
Okay.
Where it was free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big kind of decisions of national importance. Sure, a trial judge is going to make that decision, and they can kind of, within reason, say what they want to say, but that's going to get appealed. And once you get to appellate court, you have panels. So it's not going to just be one judge. You're going to have like 3 judges or more judges that you have to consult with. Once you get to the Supreme Court, you have 9. And so you don't, the theory is you're going to have less ability to have kind of just rogue decision, that it's going to be more well considered because you have more people that have to decide it.
Yeah, because I think the appeal, what appealed the Dred Scott case was the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, it overruled it.
Yeah, that's it. It overruled it.
Which can happen. So, you know, we talked about Shelby County, which just broke my heart. I was coming right out of law school when that decision happened. And what people are trying to do now is get a new law to take its place. So, you know, there certainly are ways that even if the Supreme Court or any court does something that people disagree with, the legislature, through our election, like, you know, they're supposed to represent the people more directly, they can, you know, do something to overrule it. As
and with Dred Scott, once he did become free, he only lived maybe a year or so in freedom after that case was overruled, and he passed away.
Fight or drain.
Yeah, basically. I mean, that was a 10-year fight, and then eventually getting to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And then having that ruling in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I say one question I had too about just legally was even I was wondering this for like literally like 7-8 years. Thank God for the show because it made me research things. But I was wondering like how could we have been marching in something in 1965 that it appeared was in, you know, constitutional amendment in like 1870.
Oh, like the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, I was wondering how could we need why do we need a Voting Rights Act if we had an amendment that gave us the right to vote? And I don't know, maybe as a lawyer you could clarify that, but that's like one of the questions. Even researching, I still don't fully understand.
Well, I think that's the whole issue, or I guess blessing of having 3 branches of government. And if they're not working together, so the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and then the president, the executive branch, if they're not working together, then one can work against the other. So yeah, you might have a judicial branch and within the rulings that say, or actually I guess the legislative branch that said we have the right to vote. And then also on top of that, you have state governments. So you have state governments trying to find ways, you have the right to vote, but you got to be able to count how many marbles are in this jar. You know, you have the right to vote, but you got to have a student ID.
You can't have property. You got to have a literacy test.
Right.
You got to have poll taxes. And what we touched on with that 1877 compromise and the ending of Reconstruction, we backtracked with the Dred Scott case. I think it was Dred Scott versus Stanford, because that was one of the owners that was involved in it. That had a lot to do with triggering the Civil War in 1861.
Right.
So when we get that Civil War in 1861, and then we get the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, then Lincoln is assassinated in 1865, and then Reconstruction goes on to 1877. Then we get Jim Crow, and then later on we get the case of Brother Homer Plessy in the Plessy versus Ferguson case, and then we started talking about separate but equal rights.
So it's like y'all free, but y'all can't be next to me. Go be free over on your side of the car.
And getting on the passenger cart of the train. Plessy is like, hey, now he was one of the Octoroon brothers.
Shout out
For
to
those of us who don't know.
we in the building, Wesley Snipes, 10X.
No, you're not Octoroon.
No, that's the total opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Octoroon is real light.
Hey, man.
But it sounds like, it doesn't sound that way, right?
Yeah, no.
I think it was like 7 to 8.
All I heard was
7, 8.
maroon. I didn't hear octa. I heard maroon.
It's like 7/8 white.
Okay.
So at the time he's saying, okay, separate but equal. But I'm getting in the passenger cart, and they saying, hey, nah. He let it be known, hey, well, it was known that he's black, even though he may not have appeared to be black. And it's Louisiana at the time. Yeah. And he's like, no, I don't need to leave. So then that becomes a court case.
Remember, I sent you a picture of my godfather, and and you looked at that photo, you were like, wow, like that's it. And he's not biracial. He's a black man, and he looks like, I mean, he could easily pass for not being black. I guess for the people out there watching who don't know, I'm asking for a friend named 10X. what was the actual intention behind initially separate but equal?
Because just to give it some contextual dates, I want to say that was around 1895, 1896,
Yeah.
when that happened, that Plessy versus Ferguson.
I don't really know. I think back then, as I read, like, it was just understood. It was just one of those things that's just like, we don't mix, and I imagine coming out of slavery, coming out of being property, to now you have people who are considered semi-citizens, I suppose.
Yeah, because that 14th Amendment. But remember, the 14th Amendment took us from property to you're
Men were
citizen.
citizens.
Yeah.
No.
Then the 15th Amendment was okay. Men can vote.
Right.
So the separate but equal is where you.
It's almost like a natural. Like, if I'm giving them some credit, it's easy to look back in time and be like, well, yeah, they should have done it differently.
Yeah. Some people say separate but unequal.
I mean, it clearly was separate but unequal. But I think the idea was, you free, but that don't mean we gotta mix.
Yeah,
and I don't
bro.
even think Northern abolitionists thought that black folks and white folks should mix. And so
I
think that was just the prejudice and culture.
Yeah, because Rob, when you talk about what was going on, and you say, okay, we had the Voting Rights Act, and then we got to fight for that same thing in the 60s. The separate but equal went on all the way until the 1950s. And 1954 is when you had the Brown versus the Board of Education.
But can I just say the separate but equal is going on to today?
Well, yeah, but yeah,
I mean, we separate a
touch on
lot.
that.
I mean, think about like who's sitting where in the cafeteria in college. If you went to a white school, I know some of us didn't, but or
you don't want to talk about where you went to school.
I went to Harvard. They want you to know
dang.
that.
I'm proud of you. Like, look, dog, this is a breakthrough. This is a real breakthrough on camera. I am so proud of you. It's just like, I'm proud of you.
But in any mixed environment, whether you're talking about the workplace or whatever, why are all the black people sitting together?
Yeah.
I think
Why are
there's
the
something
white
natural.
Well, one thing is a natural, it's a social thing that we'll do, but then when it becomes almost a legislative act of like, okay, separate but equal, and now there are things of facilities, because you're saying separate but equal, the separate but equal gets into the facilities.
Yeah.
Are the facilities equal? Yeah, we're separate, but the facilities that we go to may be unequal.
I think that's one of those things that we looked at initially, as something that was like segregation or something that was against us. But like just looking back with 2020 eyes, this is one thing about separate is like even going to an HBCU, it's natural to congregate with people that you identify the most with. So when you get to FAMU, there's a Texas club, there's a Georgia club.
Yeah.
Kids from Miami hang together.
But can I stop you just a question? And I don't have kids, and I haven't hung around a whole lot of kids, but I just imagine if you go to a kindergarten classroom of mixed, kids of all different races, all the black kids ain't hanging together.
I can answer that from experience.
I think that's something we learn, or is that not true?
I can answer that from experience. I went to Briar Grove Elementary School. It was me, and it was Latavia from Destiny Child. I'm dead serious.
Yeah, to put that out there.
Yeah, it was her. She was a grade older than me, and I guess when you're in elementary school, that's like it's looked down on to talk to a third grade if you're in fourth grade. But like with me, it was her, and it was a kid named Sean Ferguson who was like. Sean Ferguson was white, but he had red hair, and he was a foot taller than everybody. So even at that age, there's a separating of there's tiers being formed. I don't know if it was like something that we just were doing through like osmosis, if something that we were literally saying. But I know that like when I was at Briar Grove, my friends were like Sean Ferguson, Eduardo, who was like one of 4 Latin kids, Will, who was like 6 inches taller than everybody. Like we were kind of like X-Men in a sense. Like we all had something extremely different about us compared to other elementary school kids. So I do think even at an elementary level, it's kind of natural for us to find
from a social level. Socially, they separated, but they were still in the same facility.
Okay. And so the thing is, I think that's I'm not defending this decision at all. But I think it's not fair sometimes for us to have these progressive lenses that we kind of inherited from history, like moving forward, and not think about, well, where were they at that time? Mm-hmm. And I think at that time they were like, well, in our private affairs, if we're talking marriage and we're talking in our neighborhoods and we're talking who we eating with and drinking with, we are separate. And so why can't we be that way on the trains?
Yeah.
You know, on the trains, there's your black section, that's your white section. And so long as it's equal, this is all in theory. Obviously, it wasn't practically that way, but in theory, so long that it's equal, why do we need to mix? And why should the law come into our private space and make us mix?
Yeah, especially if we're talking about segregated areas and black businesses that may have been thriving at that time, because that's what you have to patronize. Hey, I'm going to black businesses to patronize because that's what I have. We're separate.
Yeah.
Then Brown versus Board of Education comes with almost 60 some odd years later, and now we're saying, okay, I want to be able to go to enroll my kid in a closer school to integrate that school, so I don't have to bust them way out to the segregated school. Now, some people consider that a victory, right? The Brown versus Board of Education. Okay, wow, we can integrate. Some people may say it was better separate but equal.
I can't lie. If I'm alive during that time, I would have thought it was a victory. But in 2020, I don't view like being able to integrate with white people as a victory. I don't really see it as, when I leave here, I'm going to Sweet Lips, hang with my friends, my mates. It's black owned. It's gonna be black people there. I don't want to go to, and there's other places I can go that are more multicultural. I feel like being around some Negroes, and I don't want to be around nobody else.
Well, what if you want to go to business school?
What'd you say?
What if you want to go to business school?
I'm a graduate of Florida A&M Business School. I enjoyed being around Negroes in college. But I think it should be a choice. So one of the issues that I'm starting to kind of view about America, and I mean, I know a lot of black people don't like hearing his brother's name, but Jason Whitlock made a great point. He's like, my father lived a black life. He lived in a black community. He owned a black bar. He owned a black this. And I think for a portion of us, resegregation may be a real option as to finding a place of personal happiness. I know a DJ, one of my best friends. He's a DJ. He's a music director at a black venue. He DJs primarily black parties. He does weddings for, he has some non-black clients, but he lives a pretty black life. And then when he's not DJing, he cuts hair of black people, and he lives a good life. And it's not really, his life does not require him to integrate with non-black people. And this is somebody who was an engineer, and he just went into that, and he built a life that was in alignment with his existence and reality. So I think that's a possibility for us. We don't have to integrate with them, if we don't want to.
But I think the question is, again, context, right? So yeah, theoretically, black folk might have a certain culture, white folk might have a different culture. So in some, maybe when it comes to clubs, hanging out, partying, maybe we do separate, right? Mm-hmm. But I think when it comes to education and I don't know, job opportunities or whatever, you might want to work for this white business or whatever it is. You might want to go sit in this white restaurant. Is it fair for us to have this separate but equal? And I think, in the context of we were property, right? As Dred Scott said, we're not citizens. We came into this country as slaves, and now we have, to a certain extent, some form of citizenship. Can we actually have, right? What's the legacy of that history? And the legacy of that history is, as much as you're saying, a lot of people can live this life that's just fine, go to FAMU business school and be just fine. The legacy is that a lot of times our black institutions are just not as resourced as the white places.
No, I can appreciate that. And now that y'all were even saying and researching for this and thinking about the whole black people being property thing, I thought about my last employer, and I won't say their name, but it rhymes with Booston Baptist University. And it was just a thing where they felt like they had an access level to me that I never saw with another employee. Now, obviously, I was on the front lines. I'm lead developer. I'm keeping the site up now. But there was no one else that was called that late at night. There was no one else whose vacation time was denied. There was no one else who it was ever brought up that, hey, we pay you a good salary. I've never seen another person who, in contradiction to their work, the salary was brought up. And it brought me back to, now granted, I never saw any blatant racism there, or I never saw them directly engage in anything that was we're trying to harm another ethnicity. But do I feel like I was treated as a professional at the highest level, the way that they view themselves as a university, no, I don't. I feel like I was treated as a person who has a skill set that's a necessity, but he should be happy to be here because we're giving him an opportunity.
Right.
Which last part is true. It is an opportunity, but it was no.
But you're also giving them
exactly.
labor.
Yeah, exactly, and that was treated. And I
That
never
has
heard
value.
them. I never heard someone bring the fact that we're paying you up as a token that I should share of appreciation. And that part was new. They're like, wait, they acted almost as it was brought up as if they were donating to charity more so than they were paying you for a
exchange
job.
for labor.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, and I think what Plessy was doing is saying, listen, that kind of situation is like a private situation. Like, you and your employer can figure that out. And if you don't want to work there, go work for somebody else, you know? But I think what Brown kind of did for the law is to say, no, the Supreme Court can have some power in that arena. It can say, you know, we recognize the historical disadvantage and we recognize just psychologically what being black in America is. And so because of that, we're going to take this step to try to bring resources. And I think, you know, the way that Thurgood Marshall and the civil rights lawyers brought it up was
because they were heavily involved in the Brown, was it the Brown versus Board of Education?
Right.
Yeah.
And before that, you know, they had a whole lineage of cases where they did litigate, okay, well, you know, I think their strategy was to show that separate can never be equal. But the way they litigated it was, all right, we're separate, but then make this equal.
Yeah, because I want to say the ruling in that Plessy versus Ferguson was like 7-1 in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think
they
that's
ruled
right.
against it.
So do you think, like, just as a person who's experienced like a black experience like education and, you know, the white resource rich environment, experienced law on, you know, the front lines of representing maybe some disenfranchised black people, do you feel like the equal on our end is something that a victory that we should try to win legislatively, or is it more of a cast our bucket? You know, I'm a Booker T, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, I know you're from Du Bois University. But,
I think I like them both ends.
Yeah, but do you think it's something that we should be trying to win legislatively, pointing out what's wrong, getting those laws on the books, or something that we should maybe kind of like, hey, we're going to take ownership of us and we're going to build this on our own, out free of the law?
I think both and. You know, I've seen a lot in the media lately about how black folks, you know, are always begging, you know, America to do something for them in a way that other communities don't, that other communities go and they build their own institutions. I don't know how true that is, but I do think black Americans have a very special relationship with America. I think we built this country. I think that we have a right to ask for, you know, what we should have from our government. But I also think that we should recognize, again, we're coming from a history of we were property, right? Yeah. You know, we were slaves.
Yeah.
And
the Supreme Court used that.
Right.
Yeah. Saying, hey, oh no, looking at the Constitution, it was never intended for us to look at them as human beings.
Exactly.
It's just property.
And once we finally decide, okay, we
Your
had a whole
luggage.
civil war over it. Okay.
Yeah.
And after we had that, okay,
Yeah.
y'all can have, you know, your citizenship. But even after that, you know, but we don't want to be next to you. And even in the North, they didn't want that. So I just say that's our legacy, and we still continue with it today. So I think as black folks, we got to be smart enough to recognize, like, even though we can want and we can aspire and we can ask our government to treat us equally, we got to, at the same time, treat ourselves better
Like
and build up our own institution.
We've talked about these cases, and let's give some context to how that relates to us with what's going on now. Because right now, there's an unfulfilled seat in the Supreme Court. And it's decisions that are being made that will affect future rulings on the Supreme Court. Just like we talked about these three, what we would deem, you know, three major cases in the history of black people's relationship here in America. Mm-hmm. And now to give us some context with what's going on in the present time, even if from a woman's perspective, we talking about Roe versus Wade.
Which
the
is a woman's
Supreme
issue,
Court.
but men should care about it as well.
Okay, but give me some context.
Yeah,
Not saying that I
give us some Roe v. Wade. Go ahead, teach us, Professor.
I mean, everyone just says, you know, Roe v. Wade is about a woman's right to choose. It's about women being able to have some authority over their body. The same way that men were considered, or not men, but black people were considered property, women were also considered property. And so I think, you know, as black men, first of all, obviously y'all should care about black women, but I also think you should think about the fact that in a lot of ways, and not the same ways, but in a lot of ways, women were also property. I mean, black men got the right to vote before women, I believe.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The 15th Amendment.
Right. And so that has a legacy. And part of that legacy, I mean, what law do you know that controls a man's body? You know? But men, through just the fact that...
I really can't think. I was like, hold on.
Slavery.
Yeah,
but just the fact that men have, been the rulers, throughout the history of our country.
White men.
White men.
Because we were enslaved.
Sorry, white men.
For it. Yeah. We were
White
talking
men.
about laws.
White men.
Yeah,
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to even go into the dynamics within the black community, but let's just stick to America.
But they can overturn Roe versus Wade. Is that what it is? It can be overturned.
I mean, certainly. I mean, in the state of Texas, I mean, I imagine the case will come out of Texas. I mean, this is like where the battleground is.
So if this was overturned, so now what? Like abortion would become illegal, or just?
And it's been illegal before. And then what you'll have is people with privilege can go to Mexico or go wherever they want to go to get their abortions, and the people in our neighborhoods that are disadvantaged economically are not going to have access to it.
See, I never understood. I don't know. I'm just from the school of thought like. My natural disposition is I don't want to impose my view on anyone because I really care about my view a lot to the point where like it don't matter what you think. Like my thing has always been like, hey, I don't necessarily if I'm not in alignment with gay marriage, I just won't marry nobody gay. And then it's like a problem. It's problem solved. If I'm against abortion, then I just won't get an abortion. Like I don't. So I think when we start getting to regulating people's faith, like if I don't believe in something. I just don't do it, and then I was like, I don't understand like why that's not enough, why do I have to like, hey, I like cognac, so everyone has to drink cognac, you know what I'm saying?
But see, honestly, like just to play a little devil's advocate with you, that's like a very libertarian view, like, like I want the government to kind of just be out of my life.
Yeah,
I want to do how I want to do it.
They're not really, they're not big on government.
Right. The flip side of that is I don't want the government telling me who I have to hire. And who I have to have in my restaurant.
Yeah.
And
well,
so I'm curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, they're not really big on government, government involvement.
Again, like, I'm at a point now where like my personal disposition is, I don't want to assimilate particularly in other worlds. I want to assimilate in other levels of my field and industry, and obviously to be honest too, like full disclosure, outside of the show, I'm in digital marketing. So it's a little bit different because we don't have, there's a lot more fluidity. If someone needs something and you have this ability to deliver, we're not necessarily checking for the race of the person doing it or whatever. So I live in a world that has a little bit more of a meritocracy to it than maybe like if I was in law or medicine or something like that. So I can't act like I am really endure some of the things day to day that maybe people in other fields do, but I don't necessarily feel like a need to or a yearning to want to be accepted by other people. I like being a black man. I like living a black life.
So if you had kids, you fine with them going to the black schools, and you don't want them to have the opportunity or the choice to go to white schools.
Killer Mike made a great comment. Let me not call it great. It was great to me, but a lot of people thought it was controversial about kids before the age of 13 going to schools where they're in the minority. I don't necessarily, for Robert Mayberry V, I would like to put him, if I can put him in a black structure that has the culture, the legacy. Like there's a school in New Orleans. It's probably the only high school that I've seen that has the same pride of a HBCU. It's called St. Augustine High School, St. Augustine, or as they say in New Orleans, whatever. Like St. Aug. So if I could send my kid to a school like that, a Houston version of that, I'm with it. But I do think there is a place for being comfortable around other ethnicities. When I look at myself compared to a lot of people from my neighborhood, a lot of even my family members, my special power is I'm not really, like, I'm comfortable around people that are non-black. So I'm able to move in ways that they don't know how to move, So I do think there's a place for it, but I don't think.
Well, the reason I asked is because I think the Plessy decision was the Supreme Court saying kind of what you were saying about abortion and other stuff. Like, they can do what they want to do. I'm going to stay out of it. I'm good over here. And so I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up because I think to me the way I would distinguish it is, I'm completely like, gay marriage, go for it. Abortion, go for it. Right? I make my own choices. You make your own choices, and it just is what it is. But I think when it comes to this legacy of racial injustice in our country, I do support a Supreme Court that makes an active decision to do something about it and try to correct it.
Yeah, that's what you brought up something I'm gonna have to really sit with, because I'm like, on the separate side, I don't really care what they doing tonight. Like all I want to do is be able to have, like, honestly, as long as I can do what I want to do with my people in peace, I don't really necessarily care what, I don't want them to be over there. I don't want them to be over there being imposed on or being harmed or being this, that, and the other. They can have fun. Like, hey, all of them, y'all want to go to Clutch Bar and take Jaeger bombs all night and live y'all life? Go do that. I just want to hang with my people in peace and have fun. Like, so I'm starting to really get to a point where, no, I don't need to, like, be around y'all.
If we real, if you just drop yourself somewhere in America and you drive around the neighborhood and there's mansions and there's gates and, it looks like a really, wealthy neighborhood. Color that neighborhood. Color the people who live in that neighborhood.
Hey, well, no, if I'm in Silver Springs, Maryland, if I'm in...
Are you really going to color that neighborhood?
If I'm in Detroit,
you don't know where you at. You can't see nobody. Everybody's in the house.
Conditions,
it's 12 a.m. Nobody's outside. You had to bet money. Somebody bet you money to guess what type of neighborhood that is.
If I'm in Frontenac, Southside Houston, Texas, that's a black neighborhood.
We create these not imaginary, but these boundary lines based on privilege, because that's socioeconomics, and that's stereotypes based on the socioeconomics of how we've been conditioned.
It's stereotypes, but it has a lot of truth to it.
If I know, like, okay, if I'm in Houston, I know certain neighborhoods have been occupied, but then we start talking about, places like in Houston where you got the wards, where you have like a third ward, a fifth ward, and you start thinking about what it looked like and then what happened in historically, how it changes. Or you look at what used to be called Dowling. They changed the name to Emancipation. And some people would say at a certain point in time, there were thriving black businesses. And that's where we went, and the money transferred hands multiple times. Now that person may say, hey, separate but equal, I'm fine living within that boundary line with my people, exchanging money and resources with my people is what works for me. Some people may say, hey, fighting to be able to sit at the lunch counter at Woolworths, or fighting to go to the same school, hey, that's what I want. It's just...
But I think you have to recognize the difference. Like we were talking about the Sweaty Painter case earlier, off camera. And what that case showed is that the law school at Prairie View had, at least at the time the case was brought, had faculty. I really had no full-time faculty. Yeah. Whereas UT had a number of full-time faculty members.
Yeah, they had the law school. Yeah.
Right, and I don't even think PV had a library, whereas for the law school, whereas UT did. And so what they were talking about is the fact that separate can't be equal, and this is pre-Brown, I believe.
And that's the Heenan Sweat case, and he's from Houston.
Right.
Jack Yates alumni.
Yeah. Texas is huge for civil rights cases, by the way. Civil rights battles. Yeah. But the point being is theoretically we can have certain communities like Black Wall Street or whatever that are achieving and being fine, but we also have in general overall white communities doing much better than black folks.
So I guess I would say that when you name that, and obviously I'm not trying to be like a Monday morning quarterback, but I'm saying in 2020 eyes, on a separate but equal side, is the answer, okay, Prairie View doesn't have X, Y, and that law school, say this was modern day times.
Well, separate but unequal. If you don't have.
But that's what I'm saying. Was the answer for us to go to UT, or is the answer for us to acquire resources to build
UT didn't
Prairie
even
View?
Want you to go there.
So both.
You know what I'm saying? So I guess
think it needs to be both.
Okay, all right, cool.
I mean, it'd be great if we could go to the white schools if they would accept us and all that. It'd also be great if we could have equal resources, but it's hard to get either one.
I feel that.
We talk about this new Supreme Court justice and kind of where the Supreme Court is headed. We are really close to affirmative action just being done. And as I understand it, when affirmative action, got out of Michigan, out of the University of Michigan, the black population of the school went down dramatically.
But we're not the only ones as black people that benefit from affirmative action.
Sure.
Shout out to white women.
They leave that out. Just
I
like
think white men also, actually.
White men benefit from affirmative
Yeah, because
action?
I think I don't know.
I thought we just call that privilege.
Yeah, no, I know that white women though. Like, hey, one of my personal things. That's what I thought. Bill Burr gets invited to the barbecue, the cookout, Christmas, all that.
But it's separate but equal. He don't get invited.
Bill is like, no, look, hey, Bill don't get invited. Bill is family.
Wait, who is Bill? I'm sorry.
Bill Burr, he did a Saturday Night Live monologue. And he was talking about white comedian, and he was talking about how did white women hijack woke.
Oh, that's that guy.
And then what he said was so brilliant that it was like that literally the way that a lot of white women responded was a part of the joke, because they actually got offended when it was like, you're not a minority.
They were exercising that privilege.
Yeah, a white woman is not a minority. At the end of the day, you benefited from slavery. Look, your father was a benefit of descendants of slavery.
Well,
You
women
benefited.
were property. Women did not have rights.
Yeah, that's
You're
a
not a
different
minority,
topic.
white
That's a whole other.
I'm just saying,
but that's a whole nother separate
that's
but equal
right.
topic.
That's
We
right.
start talking about genders, and that's a whole other
Yeah.
separate but equal divide.
I understood what he was saying.
Then we'd have to
That's
start
right.
talking about Sojourner Truth, and then we have to really get into women's suffrage, and that's a whole
Have
nother
me back
separate
for
but
that.
equal. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to come back.
Nah,
but hopefully we laid a foundation so people can go and research some of these famous cases and then start connecting some of these dots, and it'll really give you a lot of, I like to use, like you said, the word context. It'll really give you a lot of context for what's going on now. So when you hear the word Supreme Court, you have an understanding of our relationship as black people here in America with the Supreme Court and certain decisions that has affected us, and how that connects to certain amendments that has affected us, and how a Dred Scott case can affect a civil war starting, and Abraham Lincoln being a lawyer at that time before he became president, and looking at that case. So this gentleman's happy hour.
Thanks
the
for
young
having
lady
me.
here
Two
today.
gentlemen
Thank you
and a
for
lady.
coming. 2 gentlemen and a lady.
Yeah, this right
You
here
know.
was gentlemen versus Aisha. We had our first woman that we've been integrated, by the
Yeah.
strong
I
black
appreciate
woman,
that.
by our
Well,
sister.
Thank you for representing the legal system and giving us, we kind of shade tree, legal guys every now and then.
We
But-
jailhouse lawyers.
Yeah.
Well, hey, you need
Go Kyle Sal. Better
need
Kyle
us
Sal.
all.
But
Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, so you guys check us out every Thursday. Please hit subscribe. This is Gentleman's History Hour. Today, 2 gentlemen and a lady.
All right, and you're always
Peace.
welcome here.
Oh, thank you.
If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour.